Our second author this morning is Dr. Benjamin Wiker. He received his PhD from Vanderbilt. He's the author of 6 books. He's the senior fellow at St. Paul's Center for Biblical Theology, and he has taught at Marquette University, Thomas Aquinas College, and Franciscan University. He really is giving you the proof of a slogan that is very frequent in the conservative movement, that ideas have consequences. The good book has had a lot of good consequences, but Dr. Wiker has told us about some bad books that had a lot of bad consequences, and I'm not going to spoil his speech by telling you what they are, but I certainly do think he picked a collection of very bad books. Please welcome Dr. Benjamin Wiker.
Collection of very bad books, and it has been suggested that my book should have been added when you're on the wrong radio station getting that interview, which can't get over soon enough. Okay, I thank you for asking me to come here. It is a great honor. I thank Dr. Cantor for giving me some kind warm-up time for this book, 10 Books That Screwed Up the World. I'm going to leap right into it because I know we don't have much time. And in fact, Francis Bacon does appear disguised or taken up into Descartes in his Discourse on Method, because Francis Bacon is one of my all-time bad guys, although I choose to do organize. What kind of book is 10 Books That Screwed Up the World? It is a popular book because all revolutions are popular. I'm now going to speak on behalf of the pamphlet, because pamphlets have been at the source of all modern revolution. If you look back historically, the short work that mediates some philosophical argument to the public is the most important and influential work. And a lot of the books that I treat in 10 Books That Screwed Up the World are actually the equivalent of pamphlets. They're popularized literature mediating truth, or I'm sorry, back up, mediating philosophical arguments to the populace, okay? And that's important because both bad ideas and good ideas, that is, philosophical arguments that lead to errors and philosophical arguments that lead to truths, both get mediated that way. That's how they have an effect and trickle down into other literature and into popular imagination, into newspapers and whatever. But since the printing press, the pamphlet's done a great deal of both good and damage. But if you're out there trying to have a revolution, which is, of course, why you're here, since you all look like revolutionaries, keep that in mind. You must mediate the truth to the populace, okay? By mediate, there are 2 aspects of that. That is the truth, that is you're not lying, and you're not out to manipulate. You're out to mediate. That is, bring these truths back to the public. And 10 Books That Screwed Up the World is trying to do 2 things at once. Make people whose culture has been formed by bad ideas aware of those bad ideas, rather than just swimming in, like a fish in the water that doesn't see the water. Make you aware of those bad ideas and also mediate their opposites, okay? So I hope it's a popular book in the best sense, but I cover some of them that have been so in the worst sense. Machiavelli's The Prince is the equivalent of a pamphlet, and a more vile and destructive book would be hard to imagine. The same thing is true with Descartes' Discourse on Method, and Marx's Communist Manifesto doesn't take you long to read when you get assigned that one, okay? But 100 million people were killed over that pamphlet, and it's because it could be put in pamphlet form that it had the effect that it did. Okay. What about the title, the rather interesting title made up by my good friends at Regnery? 10 Books That Screwed Up the World suggests a kind of twisting away from the natural, okay? That is, all of these books share a common theme, a kind of twisting or bending out of the natural. That is, they all share a common error. They twist our nature in some way from the natural to the unnatural. Okay, so keep that in mind. Because one of the things that's characteristic of our situation is we have lost sight of nature. That is the foundation of morality and our natural knowledge of God. An example, Machiavelli's The Prince, which everyone should read, even though it counsels you to be evil. It twists us away from the natural belief in God. That is the first atheist, profound atheist manifesto. It's written in the early 1500s. Marx, the Communist Manifesto. It twists human nature so that we lose our spiritual nature and become purely animal and economic. That is, it imbues us with the idea that our sole goal is to provide food, clothing, and shelter so that we're purely economic creatures, not spiritual creatures. Okay, so it blunts our nature. Charles Darwin's The Descent of Man. Please read Charles Darwin's The Descent of Man. They don't want you reading this book. Okay? It's the founding document of the modern eugenics movement. Absolutely, where Darwin applies his theory and origin of the species, written about 11 years earlier, to human nature. What it does is this, and this is probably the most important moral problem we now face. It argues that human nature does not exist. That is, it is malleable. It has been cobbled together by historical accidents, and it is able to be transformed by human art. That is eugenics. Natural distinctions, therefore, are ephemeral. That is, they can be overridden by art. That is how we tie into Francis Bacon's argument about mastering nature, because it becomes possible once we accept Darwin's argument to believe that human nature is malleable, that is, under construction, that male and female themselves are accidentals that may be manipulated and transformed, that there is nothing natural at the base of our desires that cannot be transformed in some way by our desires for something else. This is encapsulated well in a great book, which is also the size of a pamphlet. C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. Read it tonight, okay? It's a glorious work, and by a glorious man. Okay, Darwin is worthy of being mentioned, especially this morning. I saw in my Free Washington Post this morning Henry Louis Gates' column on James Watson, who was the co-discoverer of the double helix, okay? And this column's pointed out that James Watson is a racist. That is, he argues that black people cannot be the intelligent equivalents of white people because of their evolutionary genetic background. And you say, gosh, where did he get that? And the answer is Charles Darwin said it. And in 10 books that screwed up the world, I include lengthy quotes of all his nasty eugenic and racist arguments, which are continued, by the way, in another book I treat, Margaret Sanger's The Pivot of Civilization, one long eugenic racist screed, okay, founders of Planned Parenthood. That's a politically incorrect thing to say. Okay, also included in here is another work is Alfred Kinsey. He's too twisted for me to talk about in public, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's in the book. And then there's Betty Friedan. I did it. I got there that quickly. There was an email that told, gosh, treat these, and then Betty Friedan was emphasized for, I don't know, whatever reason. The Feminine Mystique is a popular book, a revolutionary book. It is an expanded pamphlet. That is, it has about 3 ideas, which could be stated in half a page, which I did, thereby saving you the effort. But it's expanded in very intelligently done rhetoric. That is, the mediation of the destructive idea was very well done. It could be a case study in powerful rhetoric. Okay, and I had to read the whole thing, for which I should be compensated grandly. This book, however, is not original, and I want to stress that. It simply completes a revolution that was begun 500 years earlier. That forces you to look at a very unpleasant truth, that if you're thinking you can just go back a half a century and recover all sanity, you're wrong. You have to go back about 5. It is the end of a revolution that was an attack, a direct attack on the naturalness of the family.